Namaskar and welcome. You're watching Newsnight. I'm Sakal Bhatt. The government today announced proposals to enhance capital expenditure, which is expected to have a multiplier effect on growth of trade, growth of industry, as well as economic growth, besides creating employment opportunities for the workforce. But the post-tough lockdown measures to arrest the spread of pandemic, these measures are aimed at boosting the economy ahead of the usually high-spending festive season, which runs traditionally from October to March. And on Newsnight tonight, our talking point is going to be demand stimulus to boost economy. But first up, let's take a look at the headlines that we are tracking at this hour. Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announces 73,000 crore rupee demand stimulus package to revive demand and spruce capital expenditure. Announces LTC cash vouchers scheme, one-time leave encashment to buy goods and services with 12% GST. Part of announcements also include payments to be made in digital mode to buy from GST registered entities only. Prime Minister describes announcements as timely moves which will boost consumer spending and demand in the economy. In other news, Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh virtually inaugurates 44 different projects of border roads organization across 7 states and union territories. Says earlier Pakistan and now China, border disputes being created under a mission. He also says these bridges will facilitate military and civil transport in our western, northern and northeastern areas. Prime Minister Narendra Modi releases commemorative coin of rupees 100 denomination to celebrate the birth centenary of Rajmata Vijayaraje Scindia. Paying tribute to Rajmata, the Prime Minister says Rajmata Vijayaraje Scindia was one who led India in right direction and was a decisive leader. BJP slams former Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah for his controversial remarks on abrogation of Article 370. Lashing out at the former Chief Minister, BJP's Sambit Patra says Rahul Gandhi and Farooq Abdullah are habitual offenders, repeatedly disrespecting democratic principles and attacking country's sovereignty and integrity. Power outage in Mumbai region hits essential services and halts local train services. Mobile networks also impacted. Brihan Mumbai electric supply and transport interrupted due to incoming electric supply failure. Efforts are on to restore power supply the earliest. Meanwhile, Union Power Minister sends team to Mumbai to probe the outage. In a major success for security forces, 2 terrorists, including Lashkar-e-Taiba commander from Pakistan, Saifullah, and a local terrorist from South Kashmir, gunned down in Rambagh area of Srinagar. Saifullah was involved in a number of attacks on security forces in Kashmir. Bihar Minister for Backward and Extremely Backward Class Welfare Vinod Kumar Singh dies of post-COVID complications. President Prime Minister condole his demise, describe him as a BJP leader who worked for the upliftment of the downtrodden. Bihar Chief Minister announces cremation with full state honours. And 2 American economists, Paul R. Milgrom and Robert B. Wilson, clinched Nobel Prize in Economics for improving the theory of how auctions work and inventing new and better auction formats. The discoveries have benefited sellers, buyers and taxpayers around the world immensely. And now for the top story in detail, where in order to give a big boost to demand in the economy, the government today announced a fresh stimulus package which was worth 73,000 crore rupees. It includes LTC cash voucher scheme for government employees and interest-free loan for state governments, among other steps like an increase in infrastructure investment. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced the package. Here's a closer look at these components of the package and how it is actually expected to stimulate the economy.
The October to March quarter is the most crucial in a fiscal year for India. It is called the busy season as it gives a push to economic activity. It's also the festive season, during which most people go on a buying spree and rural demand is also high. Just in time for the festive season, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced a festival bonanza for central government employees and appealed to state governments and the private sector to give a boost to demand. The government expects the stimulus to create an additional demand of at least 1 lakh crore rupees.
We assess the total boost to the demand estimated at is about 73,000 crores. We would like to suggest to the private sector that if they also look at the LTC tax spending benefits, the total additional demand estimated therefore will exceed 1 lakh crore.
The Finance Minister announced that central government employees will be provided tax benefits on LTC component without them having to actually travel. These employees would, however, be required to spend 3 times of the LTC fare and 10-day leave encashment for purchasing items that attract 12% or more GST. These purchases will have to be made in digital mode from GST-registered outlets. Besides, the central government employees will get interest-free advance of 10,000 rupees that the government will recover in 10 installments under the Special Festival Advance Scheme. If all states provide similar advance, it will create an additional demand of 36,000 crore rupees.
The travel fare you take and spend it so that it gives a boost to the economy. Tax concessions are available even for the state governments. So the demand infusion in the economy by the central government and central government public sector undertakings, we estimate will be around 19,000 crores. The state government employees do get LTC. For them, if they give, we think that will bring in about 9,000 crores.
The Finance Minister also announced special interest-free 50-year loans to states of 12,000 crore rupees. It includes 2,500 crore rupees for northeastern states and Himalayan states, 7,500 crore rupees for the remaining states, and 2,000 crore rupees for those states which meet at least 3 out of 4 reforms given in Atmanirbhar fiscal deficit package, like One Nation, One Ration Card scheme and power sector reforms. The amount has to be spent by states before the 31st of March 2021 and can be used to pay for ongoing schemes too besides new ones. The loan is over and above borrowing ceilings of the states, and the payment will be one bullet payment after 50 years.
This 12,000 crore interest-free 50-year loan for the states have 3 components. First component is for the Northeast and Uttarakhand and Himachal. Second component is for all states, but entirely to be spent only on capital expenditure. This has a total of 7,500 crores, which will be divided in proportion to the share that they have as per the Finance Commission's devolution.
The decision to increase spending on infrastructure will boost demand in the economy. While the budget already provides for infrastructure spending of 3.12 lakh crore rupees, the stimulus package announced on Monday entails an additional spending of 25,000 crore rupees by the 31st of March. The money will be used for road construction, security equipments, water supply and urban development schemes. The FM has appealed to the private sector to complement the government's efforts to rev up demand in the economy. The booster dose to the economy looks set to give a push to demand and help those who have been worst hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. With inputs from Ajay Mishra, News Night Desk, DD India.
And now let's take a look at these measures in detail, how this tranche of rupees 73,000 crore will stimulate the consumer spending and economy to counter the slowdown due to COVID-19 pandemic following lockdown. We're going to take a look at the detailed presentation under various components vis-a-vis consumer spending, capital expenditure and enhanced budget provisions. When we talk about these 3 components, let's understand why the demand stimulus package is significant. Now, according to the latest report released by CRISIL, the rating agency CRISIL, around 30% of the two-wheeler sales have registered an upward sales in the festive months. That is extremely important. Also, 35 to 40% upward sale has been registered in electronics products. It takes place obviously during the festive season. Now, we are looking at deposits or fixed deposits. The withdrawal of these deposits between March 27th and August 14 has have also traditionally gone up by rupees 6.7 trillion, hence creating more demand during the festive season. And if you look at the e-commerce space, there's also a significant surge recorded or registered in e-commerce sector around Diwali and Dussehra season naturally. And also surge of over 40% is registered in the consumer traffic during festive season. But the big question is that will this tranche be enough to actually reboot the economy? Well, that's going to be our talking point tonight in Focus. We're going to talk about the demand stimulus, the rationale behind it, the significance behind it, and how is it really going to spruce the economic growth. On the other side, we take a short break, and our Chief Economic Advisor is going to be with us on Newsnight tonight to tell us about the measures and the significance of it after a very short break. Stay with us.
महात्मा के मंत्र। स्वच्छता में ईश्वर का वास होता है।
Welcome back. You're watching News Night. So in focus tonight is going to be demand stimulus package. We're going to talk about it and how it is actually going to boost the economic growth. Under various verticals, that is consumer spending, capital expenditure and enhanced budget provisions. And Krishnamurthy Subramaniam, Chief Economic Advisor, joining us on the show. Krishnamurthy, Professor Krishnamurthy, thank you so much for joining us. Very quickly, the rationale behind it, and the nation wants to know the basic rationale behind it, and are we actually going to achieve the target of rebooting the economy post-lockdown? Now we're looking at festive season.
Sakal, if you look at the high frequency indicators over the last few months, the unlock phase has really enabled the manufacturing sector to come back, and there's been significant revival of demand in that sector. Now, the festive season typically is a very important part of the economy because there's a lot of spending that happens at that time. People go and buy clothes, people buy gifts for each other, people travel, and that's why it's an important part of the economy. So the package that has been announced today by the Honorable Finance Minister is to try and boost the demand during this period of time. If because of the impact of COVID, people otherwise would not have traveled, and would not have utilized the LTC slabs that they are entitled to. So by using this particular aspect, what the government has been able to do is to really foster spending without having much of an impact on the fisc, because by enabling durable consumption, which is what is the focus, and that is why this has been restricted to items where the GST rate is 12% or more, which is primarily in durable consumption. Now, if you notice the pattern of deposits, for instance in the PMJDY or even the bank deposits, yes, what has been happening is that people are saving more because of the uncertainty created by the COVID pandemic. And as a result, durable consumption not only in India but all over the world, even for instance in the United States, has not been very good. Demand for that has gone down. That's why the focus has been on enabling durables consumption, and therefore the restriction has been placed on items with GST more than 12%.
So the idea is,
and by making it
yes,
digital, it's also a way of actually fostering further the digital economy.
So the idea is to induce more demand, and the idea is to put more money into our pockets so that we can spend it. But the idea is also, Professor Krishnamurthy, to see to it that the fiscal discipline is maintained. Do you think that's going to be a little tricky area?
No, I don't think there's actually going to be any problem at all on the fiscal side, because if you look at the package itself, as I said, the fiscal impact is actually not very high.
Okay.
But the other important part is that if you look at the macro measures, and for instance the current account, in the first quarter of this year the current account has done very well. In fact, we have a surplus of almost $20 billion, and that is essentially foreign savings coming in, which provides us fiscal space. So I don't see a problem at all actually on the fiscal side.
And what about the pressure on inflation? Is it going to offset the pressure? How are you going to control that bit?
So if you look at the inflation side, Sakal, it has been primarily because of supply side constraints. The Monetary Policy Committee and the RBI governor also threw light on this particular phenomenon, that it is primarily because of the supply side constraints that inflation has gone up. Now this is primarily a measure to boost demand, and especially in durable items where the demand has been tepid because of the uncertainty due to the pandemic. So I don't really anticipate that much of an effect on the inflation.
Also, states and private sector, Professor Subramaniam, how do you define their contribution, their role, because you need states to be on the same page, including the PSUs?
So the emphasis in the loans that have been given to the states has been on capital spending, and that's a very good thing, because we all know that infrastructure spending and capital spending have this attribute of crowding in private investment, which is basically just jargon for when there is greater spend by the government on capital expenditure or on infrastructure, that enables private sector to spend further. So which is a good thing. States should definitely utilize this opportunity, because whenever you look at crises over the last 100 years across the world, economic crises are typically a situation of tepid demand, and now the center has enabled the states to use some of the loans to actually increase their fiscal spend, thereby provide a demand push, which will also help in bringing in private investment and enabling consumption. So at this time, I think the states should definitely look to avail this opportunity and do the necessary spending.
And how confident are you? You talked about private companies, actually attract more and more private companies under the scheme, under the plan of action that you and your team has put in place. What is the kind of response that you are picking up from the private players?
So if you look at overall, the 73,000 crores that has been mentioned by the Honorable Finance Minister, that is the primary increase in spending, by the, especially on the consumption side. But if you take into account the typical, consumption multiplier that works, which is the fact that, my spending is somebody else's earning, and thereby, he ends up then spending and somebody else earns. That's how the things, percolate in the economy, which is what leads to the consumption multiplier. Typically, the section on which, this has been targeted, the marginal propensity to consume, we estimate it to be about 0.8 or so, about thereabouts. So we do expect actually the multiplier therefore to be significant, which will help. Some part of that will certainly come in this year, and some of that may come next year.
And that point of GST collections going up, how do you explain that?
So in this case, because the this particular package has been targeted at items that are that have a rate of 12% or above. So typically, so these will be the 18% or the 28% items, and especially durable consumption, which has been down because of the uncertainty, as I said. Purchases of those will help to bring GST, but I must emphasize that the focus here has not necessarily been on increasing GST, etc. The focus clearly is on increasing consumption, increasing demand, because that is something that is quite important at this time, and without really increasing inflation, because as I was saying earlier as well, large part of the inflation is just food inflation, and this will primarily be focused on durable items. So I don't anticipate much of an impact on inflation either, but should help in boosting demand.
Create demand in economy. A bit of elaboration on sprucing up the infrastructure space through these measures.
I think that is something which is absolutely paramount at this point in time. The budget has made a provision for about 3.5 lakh crores for infrastructure spending. If we go and look at previous episodes like these, where an exogenous shock created an impact on growth, for instance the Asian financial crisis, during which time the growth of the Indian economy for 3 years was around 4%. It was the infrastructure spending, especially the building of the Golden Quadrilateral, for instance, that really helped to bring back growth, and that helped growth to come to 8% plus levels. So from that experience, we can clearly, ascertain that it is important to, focus on infrastructure. The budget outlays has been made. Now it's about actually running that last mile and ensuring that that spending actually happens, because that will bring in more construction activity and overall private sector, activity in cement, steel, many other sectors. Infrastructure spending really has a huge multiplier impact on the economy, and therefore that is something which must be focused on from an implementation side.
And escalating job market, job opportunities, employment opportunities, this is an issue where, we're looking at the job creation also at the end of the day. Not only just creation, but actually those who need it and those who have lost their jobs should get it back.
Yeah, Sakal, that is also another aspect, which the government is working on. Do recognize that these steps, through the impact on demand, will have some impact on employment as well. But there is also a need for focusing on employment directly too, because it is employment that provides people the assurance that their incomes will remain unaffected, and that is what will motivate further increases in demand. So I do agree with you that that is something that we have to continue focusing on.
And a bit more on the states, their role, and how states will have more money to spend, and I think that's also good news for many states.
Absolutely, especially if you look at states like the northeastern states, where economic activity traditionally has not been as prominent. By focusing this loan on northeastern states and the Himalayan states, I think the bang for the buck, the opportunity for that has been maximized. That is something that I'm pretty sure that states will avail this opportunity, because it's an interest-free loan that has to be repaid after 50 years. And so they must utilize this opportunity to increase the spending, which will then increase demand and also bring in taxes as well. So overall, at this point in time, states also must be focusing on fiscal spending, because as I said earlier as well, in a crisis it is really important to focus on demand promotion.
A bit more on the private sector response so far post-COVID. Now we are on course to revive, restructure, reboot, do a lot. How has the response been so far of the private sector space, and especially to the announcements that have been made today? It's been few hours only, but then still the kind of sentiment that you sense in the private sector space.
So if I look at the private sector, overall during the unlock phase, the manufacturing sector has gotten revived very well. And I think the seminal reforms, the labor reforms, the change in the MSME definitions, and a bunch of other reforms that have been announced, even the agriculture reforms, are playing a significant part in the manufacturing sector reviving significantly. For instance, the Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing has hit a 7-year high. That said, the services sector, there is still some concern. It has picked up, but there is still significant scope for it to expand, and that's because some sectors like tourism, travel, etc., are still affected by social distancing. So overall, if you look at, I think the manufacturing sector is reviving very well. Services, there's still some scope. I would think that this particular package, which is focused especially on durable goods consumption, will, further spur the demand in the manufacturing sector and thereby really accelerate the pace of recovery that has been seen in the manufacturing sector.
And private companies, you're pretty confident and optimistic that they'll come forward and replicate the model that has been introduced by the centre at this juncture of our economy?
I think there is an opportunity for them also to to contribute in this case, because in any case the the LTC slabs would have expired without them being used, and by enabling the the employees to spend on durable consumption, they would be helping their employees as well, and in that in that process also helping employee morale. So in these difficult times, so I would strongly urge the private sector also to to try and look at this step and try and contribute their bit to increasing demand.
Professor Krishnamurthy Subramaniam, Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, what would be your message to the national audience? Because I started by asking you the rationale behind it. For many, it would be too technical to really understand. But what is not really technical for anyone to understand is that Diwali, Dussehra and festivals around the corner, and it has been an extremely tough year on consumers. And everyone says enough is enough. We want our jobs back and we want some extra money in our pockets. Are you ensuring us that?
My message to everyone, the common citizen, is that please go ahead and utilize some of these measures that have been announced. Enjoy the festivities, and we are still at work to try and come up with more measures to help the economy. We genuinely have your best interest at heart, and we are working hard in that context. Do remember to follow the guidelines that the Honorable Prime Minister has mentioned to enjoy the festivities safely, to ensure that the pandemic does not become bigger. So go and spend. I think use the use the money that these set of measures are providing to increase your consumption. Enjoy the festivities while ensuring your own health and safety.
On that optimistic note, many thanks, Professor Krishnamurthy Subramaniam, Chief Economic Advisor, for joining us on this edition of Newsnight. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, now let's move on and talk about the other stories that we've been tracking for you on Newsnight tonight. Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh inaugurated 44 bridges built by Border Road Organization and also laid the foundation stone of Nechifu Tunnel in Arunachal Pradesh today. Rajnath Singh said the bridges located in 7 states and union territories will usher in a new era of connectivity and development, especially in the far-flung areas of the country.
Heralding a new era in the connectivity of roads and bridges in sensitive areas close to western, northern and northeastern borders, Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh dedicated 44 major bridges to the nation. He also laid the foundation stone for Nechifu Tunnel in Arunachal Pradesh. These bridges are of strategic importance and provide connectivity to remote areas. The dedication ceremony was conducted through a video conference. Lauding the Border Roads Organization for its role in improving the border infrastructure, Rajnath Singh said these bridges improved connectivity in the far-flung areas of western, northern and northeast sectors and fulfilled the aspirations of local people. They would also meet the transport and logistics requirements of the armed forces throughout the year.
के निर्माण से हमारी पश्चिमी, उत्तरी और साथ ही साथ नॉर्थ ईस्ट के दूर दराज के इलाकों में मिलिट्री और सिविल ट्रांसपोर्ट में निश्चित रूप से बड़ी सुविधा मिलेगी। शिक्षा हो या स्वास्थ्य, व्यापार हो या खाद्य आपूर्ति, आर्म्ड फोर्सेस की सामरिक आवश्यकता हो या अन्य विकास के काम, इन्हें पूरा करने में ऐसे पुलों और सड़कों की समान और एक अहम भूमिका होती है।
Raksha Mantri said that roads and bridges are the lifeline of any nation and play a vital role in the socio-economic development of far-flung regions. Reiterating the central government's commitment to boost development activities in border areas, he said that progress of all projects is regularly being monitored and adequate funds are being provided for the timely execution.
हमारी उत्तरी और पूर्वी सीमा पर पैदा की गई स्थितियों से भी आप भली भांति परिचित हैं। पहले पाकिस्तान और अब चीन के द्वारा भी मानो एक मिशन के तहत सीमा पर विवाद पैदा किया जा रहा है।
Raksha Mantri described the recent inauguration of the Atal Tunnel in Rohtang as a living example of the Modi government's dedication to development for all. This tunnel is not only strategically important but is also a milestone in improving connectivity in Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh.
ये जो 10 ब्रिजेज दूर दराज के गांव के लोगों को आपस में केवल जोड़ा नहीं है, बल्कि सीमा प्रदेश की सुरक्षा के लिए तैनात हमारे वीर जवानों के सहूलियत के लिए भी ये पुल बनाए गए।
The 44 bridges are spread over 7 states and union territories. 10 are in J&K, 8 in Ladakh, 2 in Himachal Pradesh, 4 in Punjab, 8 each in Arunachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, and 4 in Sikkim. Using the most modern technology and devices, over 2,200 kilometers of roads have been cut over the last 2 years. Nearly 4,200 kilometers of surface of roads has been laid by the BRO. With Bureau Inputs, Sudhir Yadav's report for DD India.
In other news, security forces in Jammu and Kashmir's Rambagh have gunned down 2 terrorists, including an LET commander Saifullah from Pakistan and another terrorist from South Kashmir in Barzula area of Srinagar. Here's a report.
In a major breakthrough, 2 terrorists, including a Lashkar-e-Taiba commander from Pakistan and a local terrorist from South Kashmir, have been killed in an encounter in Rambagh area of Srinagar. According to security forces, Saifullah infiltrated into Kashmir this year only and was first operating in North Kashmir, and since the past 2 months, he was operating in South Kashmir.
ऑपरेशन का खास बात यह है कि इसमें लश्कर का टॉप कमांडर सैफुल्ला जो पाकिस्तान का रहने वाला है वो मारा गया है, और सैफुल्ला जो ये पिछले एक के बाद एक 3 मेजर अटैक्स में शामिल था, और नौगाम के बगल में जो पुलिस के 2 जवान, आर्मड पुलिस के जो 2 मारे गए थे, उसमें भी सैफुल्ला और आदिल अलियास टिप्पू सुल्तान शामिल थे। आदिल भी एक एनकाउंटर में पहले ही पुलवामा में सिरहामा में एनकाउंटर हुआ था, उसमें मारा जा चुका है।
Search operations were conducted and no collateral damage has been reported. According to IG Kashmir, many civilians were evacuated from the area, which is congested. In the recent past, J&K police as well as security forces have been cracking down on terrorists and infiltrators and have witnessed success thanks to the support of local people.
10 टेररिस्ट जो हैं वो पिछले 5 दिन में 4 ऑपरेशंस में मारे गए हैं। हाल में अभी तक 75 कामयाब ऑपरेशन हो चुके हैं, जिसमें 180 दहशतगर्द मारे गए हैं। 138 दहशतगर्द और उनके एसोसिएट जो हैं वो गिरफ्तार किए गए हैं।
With the onset of winters, attempts of infiltration from across the border rise. However, alert security forces and timely intelligence inputs help in countering such efforts. With Salman Qazi in Srinagar, News Night Desk, DD India.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi released commemorative coin of ₹100 denomination to celebrate the birth centenary of Rajmata Vijayaraje Scindia through video conference. He also paid rich tributes to Rajmata on her birth anniversary, and speaking on the occasion, the Prime Minister said that Rajmata Vijayaraje Scindia was one of those who led India in the right direction, and she was a decisive leader and a skilled administrator. In fact, other BJP leaders and union ministers also paid their tributes to the BJP stalwart.
राजमाता ने पद और प्रतिष्ठा के लिए न जीवन जिया, न कभी वो राजनीति का रास्ता चुना। उनके पूजा मंदिर में एक चित्र भारत माता का भी होता था। जो चाहा, देश के लिए चाहा, जन जन के लिए चाहा। अभिमान नहीं, सम्मान, ये राजनीति का मूल मंत्र उन्होंने जी करके दिखाया है।
Paying rich tributes to Vijayaraje Scindia, one of BJP's founders, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday released a commemorative ₹100 coin as part of her birth centenary celebrations. Prime Minister hailed her for sacrificing a life of comfort to fight for her ideals and serving people.
उन्होंने सबको अपना भी बनाया और ये पाठ भी पढ़ाया कि जन सेवा के लिए, राजकीय दायित्वों के लिए किसी खास परिवार से मैं जन्म लेना ही जरूरी नहीं होता। उन्होंने सामान्य मानवी के साथ, गांव गरीब के साथ जुड़कर जीवन जिया, उनके लिए अपना जीवन समर्पित कर दिया।
Prime Minister Modi said her dreams like the annulment of Article 370, which gave Jammu and Kashmir special rights, and building a Grand Ram temple in Ayodhya have been fulfilled.
राजमाता जी के आशीर्वाद से देश आज विकास के पथ पर आगे बढ़ रहा है। देश की एकता, अखंडता के लिए कश्मीर, भारत की एकता का सपना के लिए उन्होंने जो संघर्ष किया, जो प्रयास किया, उसका परिणाम आज हम देख रहे हैं। आर्टिकल 370 खत्म करके देश ने उनका बहुत बड़ा सपना पूरा किया है। और ये भी कितना अद्भुत संयोग है कि राम जन्मभूमि मंदिर निर्माण के लिए उन्होंने जो संघर्ष किया था, उनकी जन्म शताब्दी के साल में ही उनका ये सपना भी पूरा हुआ है।
Rajmata Vijayaraje Scindia of Gwalior Royal Sion of Madhya Pradesh was quite famous in the country for her successful social and political life. Her name is recalled among the top leaders of Bharatiya Janata Party. She started her political career with the Congress and later joined Swatantra Party before becoming a member of Janasangh, the BJP's progenitor. Tributes poured in for BJP stalwart on Twitter. Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh said, "Salutations to Rajmata Vijayaraje Scindia on her birth anniversary. Through her long public life, she has worked tirelessly to connect all sections of society and ensure welfare of all." INB Minister Prakash Javadekar tweeted and said, "She sacrificed her royal roots and worked for the welfare of the common man throughout her life." BJP President JP Nadda offered floral tributes to Vijayaraje Scindia at BJP headquarters in the national capital. Family members of Rajmata, including Vasundhara Raje Scindia, as well as several chief ministers, including Yogi Adityanath, participated in the commemorative ceremony and coin release.
लेकिन जनता की सेवा का पर्याय बन गई, वो भारत माता की सेवा का पर्याय बन गई, वो अन्याय के खिलाफ संघर्ष का प्रतीक बन गई। राजमाता जी केवल एक परिवार की नहीं थी, एक परिवार से निकल के वो करोड़ों करोड़ जनता के दिलों में उतर गई और लाखों लाख कार्यकर्ताओं के हृदय में समा गई।
In the words of Prime Minister Modi, a strong, secure and prosperous India was Rajmata Vijayaraje Scindia's dream, and it will be fulfilled with the realization of Atmanirbhar Bharat. News Night Desk, DT India.
Well, after a couple of hours of blackout, electricity supply has now been restored in Mumbai and suburban areas. And due to some technical snag in one of the major powerhouses in Mumbai, metropolitan region faced a power cut. Maharashtra Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray has called for an immediate probe into the technical fault that led to this outage. Meanwhile, all train services are also started, they've resumed rather, and they are running as per the schedule.
लैक नहीं है करके बोल रहे कि ट्रेन नहीं चल रही है, इसके लिए हम लोग को बैठना पड़ रहा है।
आधे घंटे से ऊपर हो गया, ट्रेन चालू नहीं है, लाइट भी नहीं है, इसलिए
परेशानी है। अभी मुझे कुछ स्टैम्प बनवाना था, मार्केट गया, वहाँ भी लाइट गोल है, किसी को नहीं पता कब आएगी।
The country's financial capital Mumbai and its adjoining suburban areas grinding to a halt. This after a major power cut hit maximum city lasting several hours. The electricity supply was restored across the region in a phased manner after a couple of hours of blackout. Officials said that due to a technical glitch in Circuit 2 of the Kalwa Phadke powerhouse, the Mumbai metropolitan region faced a power cut. The Central and Western Line train services were affected for a couple of hours. Currently, trains on all the sections in Mumbai are running as per the schedule.
12:26 को जो है कंप्लीट जो सेंट्रल रेलवे की सबअर्बन ट्रेनें हैं वो रिस्टोर हो गई है। 10:55 को हार्बर लाइन रिस्टोर हुई थी। धीरे धीरे सर्विसेज जो है हम रिज्यूम कर रहे हैं।
Union Power Minister R.K. Singh said that a probe will be conducted into the power failure in Mumbai. Maharashtra Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray also called for an immediate probe into the technical fault that led to the outage.
We are sending a team from the Central Electricity Authority to Mumbai to sit down with the state transmission authorities and find out as to where the problem was, how it started, and how it can be ensured that this does not happen in the future.
महापारेषण के 400 केवी कड़वा पड़ गए GIS केंद्र में सर्किट 1 का रखरखाव कार्य चल रहा था। उस समय सारा भार सर्किट 2 पर था। हालांकि सर्किट 2 में अचानक तकनीकी खराबी आने से मुंबई और ठाणे के अधिकांश हिस्से उससे प्रभावित हुए।
Former Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis tweeted his outrage, saying, "Trains, hospitals, water supply, and nothing is left unaffected. Hope the inquiry brings out something productive, fixing responsibility. Can we hope MVA state government takes a proactive approach as #power failure has hit Mumbai and it's getting even worse, especially due to COVID-19 times. Who is responsible for the sudden jolt in life of a common man and Mumbai coming to a standstill all of a sudden?"
कुल मिला के ये सरकार टोटली फेल है। ग्रिड की बातों में कोई ध्यान नहीं दे रही, जिनके अधिकारी कोई ध्यान दे रहे, पूरा प्रशासन फेल और BST कमिश्नर ये भी फेल है।
In hospitals and COVID care centers, no disruptions were reported. Authorities immediately began a battery backup for ventilators and ICUs. Mumbai Municipal Corporation asked hospitals to ensure enough supply of diesel to avoid failures. Mumbai's Mayor Kishori Pednekar also took stock of the hospitals and jumbo COVID centers in Mumbai after the electricity supply was restored.
Local train services were also suspended. That's the reason the lifeline of Mumbai was completely standstill. Many offices were also closed during these 2.5 hours. Well, immediately after that, the power was restored after 2.5 hours and Mumbai came into the power. Shivshila, DD News, Mumbai.
In other news, actor turned politician Khushbu Sundar joined the Bharatiya Janata Party hours after quitting the Congress party. Ravi Chandran and former IRS officer Sarvanan Kumaran from the state also joined the BJP. Speaking to reporters at the joining ceremony, the actor from Tamil Nadu said she had come to the understanding over a period of time that if the nation has to move forward, then someone like Prime Minister Narendra Modi is needed to take the country, and I quote, in the right direction and to its glory, unquote. National spokesperson of the Congress, ex-national spokesperson of the Congress, Khushbu, resigned from the party, protesting against what she called some leaders dictating terms and suppressing her.
I am completely at service to Bharatiya Janata Party, and I promise to do my best at the responsibilities that will be given to me, and I'll do my best to make sure that my state, Tamil Nadu, sees victory in the upcoming elections in Tamil Nadu.
BJP National Spokesperson Sambit Patra slammed former Jammu Kashmir Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah for his remarks on abrogation of Article 370. While we are going to take you live to another important GST press conference by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman.
इसके लिए हम क्षमा चाहेंगे। फ्रेंड्स, जैसे आपको मालूम है कि आज जीएसटी काउंसिल मीटिंग की जो चेयर करी थी हमारे मिनिस्टर ऑफ फाइनेंस एंड कॉर्पोरेट अफेयर्स श्रीमती निर्मला सीतारमण जी ने। हमारे साथ हैं एमओएस फाइनेंस एंड कॉर्पोरेट अफेयर्स श्री अनुराग ठाकुर जी, फाइनेंस सेक्रेटरी डॉक्टर अजय भूषण पांडे जी एंड डीए सेक्रेटरी श्री तरुण बजाज। आई विल रिक्वेस्ट मैम टू ब्रीफ अबाउट द मीटिंग।
First of all, thank all of you all for waiting patiently till now for the media briefing. It was supposed to have been at 7 o'clock, but because the council went on, we couldn't finish and come early. It was a very useful meeting. It was only a continuation of the 42nd council meeting, so this is not the 43rd. 42nd meeting continued, because on that one agenda, which was agenda number 9A, which had to be discussed, which was left inconclusive last time, so we took it up to further continue the discussion. All states spoke. I have heard Minister was with me, Anurag ji was with me, and the Revenue Secretary and this entire team was there. So discussions went on the issue of the borrowing, the extension of the cess, and so on. States had voiced their opinions and fairly today continue to voice. But even with that said, I would say some specific clarifications were asked and they were given also. Many of the clarifications which were asked were on the AG's opinion as regards the borrowing, as regards the Council's authority to extend the collection of the cess beyond 5 years. All that was explained as it was discussed and questions were asked. In fact, I'm very grateful that the Council started today with each of the ministers who spoke, recalling my morning's announcements and saying that it was nice of the Centre to have given a 50-year interest-free loans. All of them thanked us. Each one before starting their speech did say that. Also, they were happy about the additional fund allocation for capital expenditure. Many of them also appreciated the demand stimulus that we've given through the LTC and also the festival advance. I requested and appealed to the states to say if they ran a similar program of LTC, even they should extend that scheme and provide festival advance so that collectively India's revival post the pandemic would really be given a shot in the arm. So that was also part of the opening statement of many of the ministers. Specific clarifications, as I said, was about the extension of the cess beyond the 5 years. Compensation, how come it would be one amount and why can't it be the full amount? Even that was a bit of a discussion. The calculations varied. Where we had said very clearly it is about 2,35,000, there were some calculations given by one or two ministers which said it is only 1,85,000. So if you were anyway going to borrow 1,10,000, why can't you bring in the other 60, 70? Also thinking that the total deficit is only 185 and so on. well, eventually it was a question of having heard everybody, not just in this meeting, but also in the last two meetings. After all the clarifications were given, I explained very clearly that this GST Council is a body which represents very high authority of the finance ministers of all the states. There has been very intense engagement, not just in this meeting, but also earlier. And as regards the shortfall in the compensation, after all, it is there for everyone to see that the collection of the cess is inadequate for paying the compensation. And that's absolutely apparent for everyone to see. And because it is something which was never envisaged, the shortfall is now going to have to be met by borrowing. Specific question of why the center can't be borrowing it and then giving it to the state was answered, both by the finance secretary and by myself. Center has issued a borrowing calendar. If I go beyond that to borrow, it would immediately jack up the bond yields. The GSEC yields will go up. And if GSEC yields are the ones which are used as benchmark for every other borrowing in the country, the states going for borrowing on any other score, not just the compensation, would end up paying a very high price. The borrowing cost will go up. So will be the borrowing of even the private sector. If the GSEC rate is going to go up because I'm gone beyond my borrowing calendar, it's going to affect everybody's borrowing. And at a time when India is looking for more money to invest, more money to borrow and do business, can we afford that? But it's not going to be that much severe. The impact is not going to be all that much as it would be when the center borrows if the states were to borrow. And even from the first day's meeting, I have been very clearly saying that won't mean a chaotic every state rushing to the market. We shall arrange, we shall facilitate, we shall work it out in such a way that Tarun Bajaj has joined me today exclusively for answering those questions. We shall facilitate in such a way that states are not going to be ending up one state paying very high interest for the borrowing and the other probably being smart enough went to the market and quickly obtained something at a reasonable rate. We'll try to have something done in such a way that all states end up paying fairly equitable rate. That facilitation I have offered from the beginning. So clearly, that was explained, that as to why the center can't borrow. A lot of discussion happened on 292, 293, center borrowing under 292, states borrowing through the help of the center under 293. All this was in detail discussed. Majority of the states, as you know, had opted for option 1. On the one hand, they were repeatedly asking for speedily get us the money. We are fighting corona on the one hand, we also want the revival to happen very quickly. Festivals are coming, we need action in the ground, so help us to borrow as soon as possible. On the other, you had states which kept saying, no, let us decide on the basis of consensus. Let's decide on the basis of consensus because we have not opted for one and we are substantial numbers, so you have to have a consensus, decide how we are going to borrow. And the discussion went on for some time between the states. I was obviously keenly hearing all the arguments. I could, end of the meeting, summarize that there was no consensus arrived on a matter on which differences exist. The GST Council can certainly take a call on cess, collection of cess, extending the period of collecting the cess, and so on. That was repeatedly reiterated. But among the members themselves, there was this question of, can the GST Council order that either the center borrow or the states do this or that state do it, because every state under 293 has a business to do what it wants about its own borrowing. And the GST Council has been gracious enough in unanimously agreeing to extend the cess beyond 5 years. So if beyond 5 years the cess is being collected to repay the principal and the interest of the entire compensation, not just this compensation or that compensation, but the entire compensation, there is just no dispute. There are differences as to how it has to be borrowed, who's got to be borrowing, but there's no dispute. Every one of us agree that the entire compensation will have to be paid. It will be paid. Every one of us agree that this compensation cannot be paid out of states' other resources. Yes, agreed. Everyone has agreed on that. So there is no dispute. And therefore that was reiterated by us. At least I had to really appeal to all the members saying that there is no dispute, we may have differences. And if the numbers, say 21 who have written, are now saying, we've made a choice, allow us to do what we want with our money. We want to borrow, we'll borrow. So when I concluded, I did say, whilst I respect there's no unanimity, equally, can the council or members of the council stop another state from doing what it wants to do? I put this before the council. If states want to, on the back of having the confidence that the cess is going to pay the borrowing that they will have to undertake now for the shortfall in the compensation, can anyone or the council stop a member from doing that? Can the council stop a member from wanting to borrow and say the cess will go for repaying that borrowing? So on that point, and also very clearly saying, yes, unfortunately we were not able to arrive at a consensus, I appealed to every one of the members to say, quickly we have to give answers to those people who want money in their hands, because they are the ones, all of you all, each state are the ones who are fighting against COVID in the ground. So that was my winding up statement. So that's how this GST Council ended. That for my opening statement, and I'm sure if there's any question. Revenue Secretary is here. Secretary EA is here. We can answer your questions.
Thank you very much, ma'am. 22.
Ma'am, this is Krishnanand Tripathi from ETV Bharat. I just wanted to know, for first 4 months it was 1.51 lakh crore rupees. 2 more months compensation has become due. So what is the total amount that has become due? Second, can you also give us breakup for the 21 states, those who have opted for option 1, what will be the borrowing, and what will be the borrowing for the states, those who have not opted for any of the borrowing options?
See, the the compensation has to be provided to the states as per the Compensation Cess Act. What the Act says, that whatever money gets collected in the compensation fund, that will have to be paid, right? So when you are asking about what is the amount due, the whole question is that how much amount has been collected into the compensation fund. And in fact, the compensation says whatever was collected till the month of August, and then also till the end of the September, just few days back it has been released. Now the question that perhaps you are asking is that what is the shortfall as compared to the protected 14% growth rate, and then what is the shortfall? For that, the council in this meeting itself, because this 42nd meeting was started on, this meeting was held on 5th of October, and today it has been continued. So on 5th of October, this council extended the levy of cess beyond 5 years because the collection is not enough during this period. So therefore, the whatever amounts that gets collected will get paid, and that becomes due to them, and whatever is the protected revenue and whatever is the shortfall, that will get paid because the levy of cess has been extended beyond 5 years, so it will get paid. Now, if the states want money, sooner, then the borrowing will have to be made, and that is why, precisely for that reason, the option one, the options were given, and then the states have given the option, and then based on that, the whichever states have given the option, accordingly, the Government of India will work with the lending institutions and the states to facilitate the borrowing.
13.
I'm Meghna Mittal from Newsrise. Since there is stalemate in the GST Council regarding the issue, by when do you see the resolution? What are the options? Is there a GOM that could be formed, or how do you see the resolution of the entire issue?
Oh no, there is no unanimity, but the cess has been extended beyond 5 years, and equally, if there are states which want to go and borrow, we are willing to facilitate. I have also kept completely the option open for states to come and talk. If they want to wanting to ask me any more questions, I'm willing to engage with every state.
6.
Good evening, ma'am. Ruchi Bhatia from ET Now. Ma'am, since you are saying that the states that so far have opted for option 1, they will be allowed to go ahead and borrow funds. Just wanted to...
1 minute, Ruchi. Let's be clear on one thing. I don't think anyone can allow or disallow a state from what they want to do.
Right.
We have to be clear on that. It was more on the question of discussing with a sense of, being sure that the cess will get extended or not. There were also views about why the center can't borrow, for which I've given the answer. So I want that thought that somebody can stop. In fact, many of the states compared it with the UN Security Council. They said, is this a Security Council where somebody will veto and the rest of them will have to obey? Some states did ask that also. So the GST Council, and I made it a point to say this, I don't think the Council's intent is to stop anybody. So let's understand that.
Ma'am, just a clarification on that. How soon will we proceed with the borrowing for states that have already agreed for option 1? And secondly, in case the other dissenting states knock the doors of the apex court, what is going to be our next step of action to ensure that either their concerns are dealt with, or will we see this battle now going to the courts?
I want you all to not use words like battle. There wasn't any battle there. There wasn't any battle there, and GST Council is, I think, one of those very respected federal institutions. A lot of discussion happens. Definitely there can be differences. But where a unanimity is not there, that doesn't mean there's going to be a dispute. Let's be clear on that. And as regards what is going to happen about borrowing, which are the states which want to come and access, Tarun will explain it to you, how soon he can provide. And I'm not answering any questions. So what happens if they go to court? I'm sorry, no, yeah. I don't expect a dispute. I have explained as to why there is no dispute. And therefore, I have also said, whoever wants to talk, please talk. But as many states said in the council, further talking, holding other states will only make them appear very poorly in their own back home states. Because they come to the GST Council thinking that there will be some answers given to them. They can't go back now to repeatedly say, sorry, the council couldn't arrive at a consensus, so till then I'm not doing any expenditure, whether it is pandemic, whether it is development, or whether anything else. We are answerable even to them. Does our conscience allow us to hold back states which have opted for something, saying we'll have to hold you back till such a time a consensus is arrived at? I did ask this also as a question. Does the collective conscience of the council, in its quest for unanimity, which I also strive for, which I also strive to arrive at, and that is why 42nd meeting has had an extended meeting today. All of us try to keep with that spirit of consensus in decision making. But is it going to be till such a time that the consensus is arrived at, states are going to be held back from, if they want to go ahead, borrowing? And especially when the borrowing comes under Article 293, it is the state's right to decide what it wants to do. Even this was raised. So, battle, dispute.
20.
But Tarun, can you please explain?
I'll talk to you about the borrowing part only. The Honorable FM had explained to you in great detail as to why the center should not borrow and the state should borrow. I may also add here that the 15th Finance Commission had given an interim award last year, and when the award was given, the COVID was nowhere near that. So there were certain amounts to be given to the states based on a percentage basis, and there are certain amounts which are to be given to the states on the basis of the actual quantum. For example, the revenue deficit grants are mentioned as the amount. The SGRF grants are mentioned as an amount. The local body grants come as an amount. So the center has actually carried out those responsibilities in spite of the fact that COVID has also affected the center's revenues. And though our revenues went down and the center does not even have the option of a compensation on account of lowering of GST, but on the understanding or on the basis that the states are at the forefront of fighting COVID, that assistance was given and should have been given. We have already increased our borrowing borrowing amount from 7.8 to 12 lakh crores, and in the first half of this year, we have borrowed more than what we had borrowed in the whole of the last year. So, as she had explained to you, I will only emphasize again that the extra borrowing or the strain on the central government fiscal will have a greater bearing on the macros, and for the interest of all the players in the system, it is better that we try not to expand the central fiscal deficit beyond a point. Having said that, let me also belabor with you to explain what is this whole issue about. The amount has to be paid, the GST compensation has to be paid from this compensation cess amount. The compensation cess is levied on certain products which have a higher GST rate. That amount comes into the consolidated fund, goes to the public account, and from there it is distributed to these various states depending on how much is the need of each state or what is the deficit of each state. Now, when there is a shortage in the compensation cess, and the compensation cess has been decided to be taken ahead from July 2022 onwards. Therefore, it has been mentioned that amount should be borrowed and given to the states to fight COVID at this very difficult time. But the point that I want to belabor with you, emphasize to you, is that both the interest and the principal will be prepaid from the cess amount, compensation cess amount. That money will not be paid either by the central resources or by the state resources. So the money will come from the compensation cess, and this compensation cess will be collected from July 2022 onwards till all the compensation cess principal which has been borrowed has been repaid, all the interest on that amount has been paid, and also the less compensation which is paid for the current year and maybe for the next year has also been paid. So it is, I would say, a third party or a third person who's actually taking the burden of both the payment of the principal and the interest. So this issue needs to be looked at from that point of view. Again, having said that, I would say we have not done detailed calculations, but I can say that from July 22 we'll start having money, because there will be no compensation which would become payable to the states on account of the shortfall in July onwards. Only the previous backlog would have to be paid, so that money would become available for payment of interest, for payment of principal, for payment of the less compensation cess